Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hit and Hustle from IrishSportsDaily.com. I am your host, Greg Flamong, and with me, as always, is Jamie Uwayama, Mr. Jamie University. It is Thursday, June 27th, and we're going to be talking some blue chip ratio rankings for Notre Dame. Bud Elliot of 247 came up with the blue chip ratio, which is essentially the number of 4 and 5 stars you have on your roster. 50% is kind of the number that every national champion has had since he came out with the rankings. They've been over 50%. That's where you want to be. Notre Dame is ninth this year at 67%, which is a good sign, and we'll get into why that is. Still work to do, of course, but Marcus Freeman has done a good job, kind of building that number back up. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the overall roster and whether it is actually a national championship caliber roster, how to incorporate the transfers into the rankings and into the analysis of Notre Dame's blue chip ratio. And we're also going to lead off the show with a little rivalry renewed type situation that Notre Dame announced today with Michigan State. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. If you like what you hear today, please hit the like button. Please hit subscribe. Please hit the notification bell so whenever it is we are going live. Links to our podcast are in the description below if you prefer the audio format. And as always, everyone, we are brought to you by ESQ Clothing, which was founded by Notre Dame alum Ge Wang. You've seen ESQ on all your favorite Notre Dame players and coaches. With over a decade of making the best custom clothing available, ESQ will help you look and feel your best in 2024. From a perfect fitting suit or sport coat, shirt or bomber jacket, or the perfect tuxedo for wedding season, like Ian Book just got married and took advantage of ESQ's wonderful tuxedos for his wedding. He looked awesome in his, I think that was like a greenish kind of hue suit. He looked very, very good. Check out God's amazing work at esqclothing.com. Book an appointment to upgrade your wardrobe today. Mention ISD and get 10% off your entire purchase. Jamie, how you doing? I'm gonna be honest, like I'm buzzing. The Lakers are back. They drafted Dalton Knecht from Tennessee. People are buzzing about steal of the draft. He was a top 10 talent. He fell because he's 23 years old. Age discrimination run amok. But I'm the Lakers are back, Jamie. I'm fired up. Can't wait to talk Laker basketball because we talked about it on a couple shows ago. People going on the Celtics. That's all. That's old news. The Lakers are the present. Fired up, Jamie. How are you feeling today?
I don't know about the Lakers are the present. I don't think he puts them over the top in the West. I'm just going to be flat out honest, but I think it's a good pick. A really good pick. A great pickup. Like I'm thinking of like who's the UCLA kid who went to Miami last year?
Jaquez,
yeah.
Jaime Jaquez, yeah.
So I think that's a very similar type of, a guy who can be a rotation guy.
Yeah.
Immediately and be a good player. So it's probably going to be a good player right away. I don't know if that's going to make the difference, but hey, it's a good pickup. It was a fortunate pickup for them.
Yeah, it's fine. Draft. What's with the NBA draft going to 2 days now? Come on, let's get out of here. Like, it's like 1 Pacific time, the second round. Go away. What is Silver? Yeah, that's terrible. Like, just doing it all in one night. No one cares about the draft. Get to free agency. That's what
I'm sure it's a TV. Like it's there.
Oh, of course it is.
Through that. Okay. I don't know. It's so funny because Richard Jefferson was talking about how, oh man, everybody should come to the draft, because he didn't come to the draft and he was a lottery pick.
Yeah.
Well, tell that to the guys who didn't get drafted.
Yeah.
Like, that's horrible. They invited too many guys to the draft. Yeah, they do this all the time. And yes, and now especially the fact that you're going in over 2 days. It's like those guys just sat there the whole time. And they don't get a moment.
Yeah.
Today, because it's like not that how the draft is today. It's apparently more of like an ESPN studio thing rather than like at an event. So that sucks. I mean, that totally sucks for those guys. Like, always, I mean, you could understand why, when Brady Quinn went to the draft, it was like, well,
I mean, they thought he was
they thought he was going to go way higher or
draft.
whatever,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's a different kind of scenario, but hang with your family.
Hang with your fam. That's what I would do. That's absolutely what I would do. TV ruins everything. They ruin everything. All right, let's get to the news of the day. Notre Dame announced the dates for when they are going to be playing Michigan State in 2026 and 2027. Hat tip to my guy Brendan McElinden, very piratey. Pointed out in our DMs, like Notre Dame announced this in 2017. This was known in 2017 that this was going to happen. I have no idea how he remembered this. I did not remember it at all. He pulled up the article, but they announced the dates, when it's going to take place, when those games are going to happen. And I mean, a lot of people like the old rivalries with Michigan State. A lot of people want Michigan back on the schedule. Let me ask you this, Jamie. What's your of the recent kind of games against Michigan State? I mean, let's go back to like 2002, I guess. The Arnaz battle, Pat Dillingham play. There's the 05 game. Obviously, that's not a great one, like a great memory for Notre Dame fans. 06 game in the monsoon with the Valenti rant. Notre Dame comes back from 37-20 in that one. That was amazing. Or 37-21, whatever it was. Yeah, especially in the conditions. That was very unlikely. And then you've got the 09 game with the Golden Tate jumping in the band. Of those, which is your favorite game? Which of those are your favorite?
I mean, by far the comeback. Like, it's not even close. 06, like, it's just, that was a game. And I remember I was with a bunch of friends. One of my good friends who was also a Notre Dame fan, and then just some other people who were just kind of not really big college football fans. But we were playing. We had a poker thing that we were doing, and we were playing a poker night, and basically we were like, well, I guess we'll just keep it on the background because this just isn't going well, right? It was obviously, it didn't look like Notre Dame was gonna win that game, and then obviously the way it played out, it's probably one of the best. I mean, I think it's one of the best comebacks they've had in the last 20 years, maybe the best. Could it be the best? I can't think of another one.
The best comeback. I don't remember like a ton of comebacks because like lately they've been just kind of ahead. Like usually they're ahead, and if they're not, then they just lose the game. I would say it's probably the best comeback. I can't think of another one. I can't even think of one. Maybe someone can refresh my memory, or our memory. But yeah, it's the best comeback. Usually when Notre Dame, if there is a comeback like that, it usually like, oh, they come back. And then it turns out like not. Like the 14 game against Arizona State, like that was 34-3. They got it back to 34-31. They ended up losing 51-31, right? Like ended up losing by 20. Like that would have been an amazing comeback. It kind of the same ilk, right? It just in terms of like, man, they looked just totally dead in the water, and then it all just kind of happened for them. Now, obviously, it wasn't raining. The weather was perfect at that point, and they also did end up winning the game, and they never actually took the lead. I mean, the other great comeback would have been against Michigan State in 05, right, where it was just kind of like that one. That one felt like it was so close to the 04 season, and the offense looked so good in that game. It's like, even though Notre Dame lost and that was a bummer, it was like, man, this offense looks great. Whereas the 06 team was like, they were number 2 in the nation. They were supposed to be really good. They just got destroyed by Michigan. And then you come out and you look terrible against Michigan State. It's like, oh my goodness. Yeah. Like, are they actually bad? Cam and Crazy 818 said the 06 team greatly underachieved. I actually don't think they underachieved that much.
I actually think they just weren't that good.
I just think they were
they were overrated.
People talk about Notre Dame being overrated, and that's usually like
they were 100% overrated.
Actually, they're properly rated. That 06 team was overrated for sure.
Yeah. I mean, there was a bunch of factors that went into it, because it was the Charlie Weiss. People were all on the Charlie Weiss train.
Yeah.
Like, he basically transformed an anemic offense into like a super exciting, high powered offense. Quinn was back, Smart was back, Tommy Z, like,
Darius Walker was
they
back.
had all these pieces come back, but the reality was that they had a lot of holes on that roster, right? Like a ton of holes, right? Like, and if you remember, that was the Sports Illustrated cover with Travis Thomas. With respect to Travis Thomas, but like, if he's one of your guys on the cover, that's probably not a great sign that he's definitely not like, was an elite guy, right? So I think that team just didn't have the depth. They weren't really that good up front. And they had lost some guys from that 05 team that they didn't have guys replacing because of all, like, you got to remember, it was all leading up to the, debacle in 07, but because Ty Willingham, there was nothing there. Like, the cover was bare. So there wasn't guys coming up on the roster. So, and they didn't have the portal to kind of like plug holes. Cause I think if they would have had it back then, they could have plugged some holes and been pretty good, but like, they were just overrated. They just had some really good players, and that was kind of it.
Yeah. They were very, very top heavy. Here's a trivia question for you. 05 and 06. How many teams did they beat that finished ranked in 05 and 06?
Ooh.
Finished ranked. So like in 05, they beat Michigan at the time. They were number 3 in the nation. They finished 7-5.
Yeah. I think it was, I'm going to guess like 2. Like, I don't think it was, like
it's 1. It's the Penn State win, which was a legitimately good win. They won by a ton of points in 06 to start the year. And I think that team finished 9-4 or something like that. And so they ended up finished ranked, but everyone, no, they had no other ranked wins that they finished.
Yeah. So, which reminds me of some of these other years where, like, where you'd have like Stanford ranked and USC ranked and some of these teams, and they just be completely underachieve, or were overhyped. And then, Notre Dame kind of got the benefit where it looked like they had a gauntlet of a schedule, but it really wasn't. Like the opposite of exactly what we were talking about last show, where, people weren't expecting Duke to be at this level or Louisville to be at that level, but they were. Right.
Exactly. So, hey, I got another hot take for you. You ready for this?
All right.
Related to Michigan State and Notre Dame, the Golden Tate thing, jumping into the band.
Yeah.
It's overrated.
Oh, I 100%. It's so overrated.
It's so overrated.
Respect to Golden Tate. All respect
yeah,
to
for
Golden
sure.
Tate.
It's a cool thing, but like, I wish people would just stop like glorifying it like it was the greatest thing ever.
10 million other things on the field that were way better. Like, let's talk about him just like going up and grabbing that Hail Mary. I think it was against Wazoo, right? Like, or just stuff like those great plays. It really wasn't that big of. I'm 100% with you. I just don't think that it was that big of a deal. Like, it was way overhyped. Overhyped.
I don't like it. And I just like, I don't like everything is like, oh, Notre Dame, Michigan State, Golden Tate jumping in the band. Like, it just, okay. Like,
also too, whatever, cool. Call me old school or whatever. But I'm like, if it would have been way different if it was like, well, this is actually part of the play where it was like, oh, and then he went into the band because he had to. Yeah. But it was like, he purposely jumped into the band. Like, it was, kind of not cool, not the coolest. Like, everybody loves it if you're a Notre Dame fan, but like, it was, not the coolest. Like, if someone did that to the Notre Dame band, if Reggie Bush did it or just whoever did that, people would lose their minds. Right? Like, so I just say, okay, it's a cool little viral moment, but I'm so glad you got that takeoff because I've felt that way for years and years.
Jamie's been simmering
Yeah.
on this for
Oh yeah.
forever. Yeah, I think Coach Humph is right. We were talking about the greatest all time.
Just the last
comeback.
20 years. Last
Yeah,
20
yeah.
years.
I think the chicken soup bowl game
Yeah.
in Cotton Bowl that probably takes the cake as far as Notre Dame lore, especially who it was and the fact that it was a big bowl game like that. That definitely probably takes the cake there. All right, let's move on to the blue chip ratio. Notre Dame at 67% finished ninth. It's not really a ranking. It's literally just listing the top schools.
Yeah.
So it's not like a subjective thing. It's literally just objectively, this is where it is. They're ninth at 67%. You wrote about it in 6 Thoughts on a Thursday today. Go over for the people kind of the significance of that number, where Notre Dame is at. Ohio State is number 1 at 90%, which is that the highest it's
the highest
anyone's ever had? Yeah. So they're at 90%, and I don't know even if they're taking it into account transfers and that sort of thing. Like it probably does. Like Caleb Downs, he's a 5-star player, right?
Yeah,
so
they're not taking
he probably
account.
goes into
I don't
that.
think so. Like I don't even think Julian Sayin is counted in that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right, so then it's probably even higher then, because I don't.
Oh, it's less because it's less based on the number of transfers that they've done, and Bud Elliot added it with if you brought in 10 transfers,
yeah,
and only 3 of them are
right,
whatever, and that's how they kind of do it. So they went down. Most teams go down. I think Florida State was one of the only teams that went up. Most teams went down, because you're getting guys to kind of fill holes for depth, which, and you're also too picking up guys that are from sometimes smaller schools and all that. And so, I mean, whatever. The point is that like, if you look at like based on, I think Matt McCarthy posted the thing about the guys on the roster, and that's really like kind of not what it's not technically like kind of what it should be, but it's not really what it's that's not what this is, right? Because this is how you've recruited, right? How you've recruited over 4 years. So this is the 21 through the 2024 recruiting classes, because there might be some 2020s hanging around, maybe even some 2019s and whatever, because of the COVID extra year or whatever. But for the most part, your roster is built from those 4 classes, and how you recruited from those 4 classes has mattered. All the props to Bud Elliot. You came up with this probably on a lonely day, just figuring out like some kind of thing to write about. And I mean, it's turned out that everyone who's won over 50% of their, or who's recruited at a blue chip ratio, which is 4 and 5-star recruits, over 50% during that 4-year span. Every single national championship has been over 50%. It's since 2011. So that's a long, long time. And obviously it varies because, there's some near like Florida State in 2013 was 53%. Michigan last year, 54%, right? Like those aren't great. Mark Clemson in 2016, 52%. So it's just like, just over. But most of the every other one is 60% and up. And then you have Alabama was 83%, Georgia 80%, Georgia 77%, Alabama and 80%, like Alabama another 77%. Like a lot of times it's up near the 70s, and so the 67% for Notre Dame. What makes it so interesting is that one, this is tied for the highest it's ever been at since Bud Elliott's been tracking it. So I think that is significant because it shows that they're recruiting and landing blue chips at a higher rate, as high a rate as any time during the Brian Kelly era. And that's because they've increased it. So the first year for Marcus Freeman, they're at 55%. So they're up 12% in the last couple of years, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's obviously pretty significant, right? And the one where it was the highest before was 67% for Notre Dame in 2015, which obviously people know that team was pretty loaded, right? That was a team loaded with talent. But that team that year they had the fourth highest blue chip ratio percentage, there, and now it's ninth, like you said at the beginning, right? So teams are getting more, are recruiting at even higher level, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there is some of it where I'd say like there are more 4 stars now than there were before. Like before it used to be like say like to 350 and now it's more like to 4 something or whatever, right? In terms of, so there is a higher amount of composite 4-star recruits out there. So that's part of it. But also like all these teams are just recruiting at a higher level because the best guys want to go to these schools, and less of these guys are signed with like NC State
Yeah.
or middle of the pack schools, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the distance between the top teams and everyone else is just growing, right? So, the 16 here, like this is the list of the 16 teams that are on it, right? So Ohio State, 90%, Alabama, 88%, Georgia, 80%, Texas A&M, 79%. And we'll get back to that, because obviously that's relevant. Oregon, 76%, which I think people might be surprised, but Oregon has recruited at an extremely high level in the last, at the end of Cristobal, with what they've done with Dan Lanning. They've done a great job. Oklahoma, 73%, Texas, 72%, LSU, 70%, Notre Dame, 67%, Clemson, 64%, Florida, 63%, Miami, 61%, Penn State, 61%, USC, 59%, Michigan, 56%, Auburn, 53%. Florida State is just under that. If you add the transfers, they're the one team that kind of swaps in.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say they're kind of at the level. So if you look at like 16 or 17 teams and look at all those programs I listed, it's money, right? Like it's the blue bloods. Like there isn't, the closest thing to a non-blue blood, you would say, is Oregon, because they've kind of invested and got into that level, right? So now you don't have, it's so like say Michigan State getting on the schedule, like Michigan State is not anywhere close to that.
Right.
Like they're probably like closer to like 20 to 30% or something. And that's such a long distance to catch up from, right? And like every team in the Big 12, there's no Big 12 teams on there, right? 13 of the 16 teams are, Big 10 or SEC teams, which, kind of makes sense after with the realignment. And then the other teams are, Clemson, Miami, Notre Dame, and then, Florida State, if you want to insert them in there too. But like, that's it. It's like, those are the blue bloods. And like, there are no blue bloods in the new Big 12, right? There's none of those teams. So no Big 12 team's going to win a national championship. They're not even they just don't have enough talent. They don't have enough talent.
Right. And the teams that they did, that like the Oklahomas and the Texas, like they're not in the conference anymore. So like, it's just, or Oklahoma. Wait, Oklahoma's still in the Big 12, right? Oh no, they left. No, that's right. They're out. So like they don't have, like, those are the schools that had a chance and now they're out of the conference. So like, yeah, it's completely, it's just like what we think of Oklahoma, of the Big 12. It's just not there. And you made the point like about the playoff, like they shouldn't be treated like all the other conferences now. Like in terms of just like getting that automatic bid or whatever, like it's just, they're not that powerful of a conference anymore. It's just true. So, so Notre Dame at 67%, right? I feel like my impression when I read that was like, okay, that's about where they've been. But I think I do remember now, and when you mentioned like, oh, they're back up to where they were, because I remember I believe they're at like 64%. 63%, something like
Yeah,
that.
they were around there
They're around
year,
there. They dipped, and then they're coming back up. And I have to imagine, like in the next couple of years, they'll be around the 70% mark,
Yeah.
71% mark.
They're going to be it just right now. If they just sign everyone who's committed right now,
Yeah,
and the rankings don't change for the guys, right?
yeah,
They
yeah.
would be at 73% for 22 through 2025 for
Right.
recruiting. So that is obviously the highest that it's been, right? So
Yeah.
it's significant, right? Like it's very significant, right? And
like not to
and
cut
then
you off, not to
yeah,
cut you off, but I do want to make this point. It includes the quarterbacks, multiple quarterbacks, and that
yes,
is why like that is also significant. It'd be one thing if you still had like Notre Dame doesn't have those, you know, well Drew Pine was a 4-star, so he would be in there. Brennan Clark's, you know,
yeah,
like he's not in that anymore, right?
yeah.
And so like they have these guys who aren't just blue chips, but like top 100, and so like that's what makes the 73% a little bit more significant. Sorry to cut you off by one.
Yeah, right. Because what you're doing is you're eliminating the 2021 class, which was like 14 blue chips to 13 3-stars, right? They signed
Yeah,
a bunch of guys, and the percentage of the guys of the 3-star, most of those guys are gone,
yeah,
right? I mean, quite a few of the 4-stars are gone from that class too. That was the COVID year, right?
yeah,
So recruiting year. So it's a gong show for everybody. 2021 class period is not a class that has stuck around at a lot of the big places, big schools. But and then you're substituting 2025 in, and there's where you're just over 50% and you're going to be 70 something percent in this class or whatever it is, right? So it's going to go up. And you also have to remember that out of the guys they have left, everybody's a blue chip left, so the percentage is only going to increase, right? So I mean, it won't impact that greatly, overall for the thing, but it would go up by like, if they sign 4 more guys that are blue chips and everything else is the same, they'll go up like 1% overall or whatever, right? To the thing. And anyways, the point is that they're like to be over 70% when, a lot of the BK years, they're kind of like mid 50s for a lot of it. Like that's a big deal. Like that
yeah,
that is a big deal to have that many more guys that are considered, blue chips that you're signing, right? Like that is significant. That speaks to depth. That speaks to like more chances of guys to develop into elite guys. And I it's not to say that they can't do better at landing certainly the 5-star types, the top 50 types, whatever, top 100 types. I think that is a definite thing. But when you're signing more guys that are like, not like ranked, there was a lot of times during the BK years where you're like, oh man, I don't know why they took this guy or whatever, right? And there's far less of that now. Even though, any one time when a guy gets who's a 3-star gets offered, people complain. A good chunk of the time, those guys end up moving up for that's what at least what has happened under kind of like Freeman, Chad Bowden era.
yeah. What do you? I guess what do you make of? So this is just like raw data, right? Like this is just the data is the data. I feel like people like that 73% number to me, like it's pretty shocking in a good way. Like, wow, like you'd have to feel just incredibly like, man, they have a really good chance in the next couple years with those numbers, right? And again, that's data. That's not our projection or anything. That's not like, um, if guys gain in rankings or whatever, like that's just is what it is. Was that your impression going in? Like, were you surprised by that? Because I think a lot of fans would be kind of I don't think people feel like, man, recruiting is definitely on like a big uptick right now. And part of that is like the ebbs and flows of the recruiting cycle, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think people would be very much on board with that sentiment if, like, Derek Meadows and Madden Faremo and Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng like committed tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
Everyone would see that, but like I feel like that's not the sentiment, right? Like I guess this is a very good question from CFB Hertz, because it kind of goes to what I'm talking about. When it comes to can't miss top 50 type guys, can Notre Dame do better? I like to think we can. I like to think we can, but we've done so poorly with that kind of recruit for so long. I'm not sure anymore. And I feel like, and I think for a lot of Notre Dame fans, and just as a topic of the point of discussion here, I feel like for a lot of Notre Dame fans, it's like Notre Dame recruiting isn't where fans or analysts or whoever wants it to be until it's like you're landing not even like top 50 types. But like, okay, this is a good example. There was an update. Matt had an update on Tanu Hines, where it was like, he thinks Texas would be the top school if they were recruiting him hard, but like they're in on 3 5-star wide receivers. And so he may not be a priority take for them. And like Notre Dame is not in that position, right? And like even if they were in that position, like that would, like, that's kind of where you want to be. It's like, I don't know if we can fit Tanu Hines because we have 3 5-stars who might want to come into the class and look like they're in a good position. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like until Notre Dame gets to that point, it's like the numbers are going to feel, I don't want to say hollow, but just like there's a little asterisk next to them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think you just to kind of go back to what you were saying about like the reactionary part of like it's so much of reacting to recruiting is like, what have you done for me lately? So it's like you lose on some guy and it's like, man, the sky is falling. And then you win, and then it's like, man, they got it rolling right now, right? There's so much of that. And obviously, too, with Notre Dame having so many guys already committed in the class, they're not having this isn't the 5 guys that are announcing in 5 days, right? It's not that kind of time. So that's part of it. And then, but I do think that, like, I think if you were looking at kind of what's missing, you would say like, so you can look at it a couple ways that Notre Dame is doing, I think this year doing better overall with top 50 type kids. Like I have in the ISD Fab 50, like Will Black, Deuce Knight, Ivan Taylor, Dallas Golden they're in there. So that's like more than they've had. Than I've had. I've never had 4 Notre Dame guys in my top 50 before. So, but I think if you look at it and then you look at like the rest of the list, it's like Notre Dame's not landing any of these other guys. Like they're not in it for any of these other guys, and I think that's kind of what's missing really is that, that I think people want to, it's right now Notre Dame is at a point too where, and they've done well and have increased it overall. And I've always been someone who's I've looked at it through the big picture lens of it and not kind of overreact to like, well, they didn't sign Keon Keeley or this and that, right? Like I'm always kind of looking at the bigger picture because that class that they didn't sign Keon Keeley and Peyton Bowen was still a very good class, right? It's just that it could have been a great class. But I think the main thing with Notre Dame is that, and maybe it's part of it is purposeful because they're like, man, we're not going to even get in the mix with some of these guys or whatever. Like, so maybe they're just not even pursuing it. But like, it's not like they kind of have to land Derek Meadows because he's seen as that big fish in the class at receiver. Yeah. And they don't have these other guys. They don't have like, well, if they don't get him, they could still get French or they could still get, that's not But what it's not even to the point where what if you got two of them, right? Like it's like, man, that's it, right? So, I mean, they can recruit. I mean, to John Collins' claim, they can recruit a bunch of those guys. It's just that some of it is logistical, like in terms of like guys in the South, like some of these guys aren't looking for anything. Like they're not looking to move to Indiana. They're not looking to move to Indiana. Some of these guys might not even be looking, like some of them might be looking at Ohio State or whatever, but not all of them, right? So it's like, well, and even if you're looking at Ohio State culturally is so different than Notre Dame that also could play a factor into it. And that's even with taking up the grades and all that kind of part of it. So, I mean, yeah, they have a smaller list than everyone else. It's been a fact for years. But I mean, it doesn't stop them from recruiting really well. It's just that you just have to do better, and you also have to do good enough to attract some of these guys to be like, man, I really want to check out Notre Dame. So it's like Notre Dame, there is very much a chicken and egg kind of thing when it comes to, it's like people want to land, man, why don't we land more stud defensive tackles from the South? It's like, you kind of have to have put enough guys in the league for them to want to come there. So like, if you think about it, Sheldon Day and Jerry Tillery have been the only defensive tackles that have been drafted for Notre Dame in the last decade or whatever, right? And that's it. So when Mills and Cross go, they double it all of a sudden, right? So that hopefully helps you land the next guys and all that too, right? Like that's what you want. But also too, you want to hope that like Riley Mills has such a monster season that all of a sudden he's like a borderline first round pick or something. And I'm not saying it's likely it's going to happen, but if that did happen, that would help boost recruiting. It's like, well, everyone always wants to land the next Michael Floyd and the next Will Fuller. It's like, well, Ohio State didn't start landing all those guys until they started putting guys in the league and then they just went to like a totally different level. It's not like they didn't, haven't recruited well at receiver over the years for decades, but what they're doing now is like completely different than even what they did. You're looking at like the heydays of, John Cooper and Tressel and like all that stuff. It's not even close to what they're doing now with Heartline, right? But it's like he's had such a track record of success with all these guys in the first round. It builds on top of it. And that's been the thing with Alabama, was it just kept stacking on top of it. And same thing with Georgia too. Right? And everyone's talking about like, man, Georgia, they keep signing these these stud defensive linemen. It's like, well, they put so many guys in the league who have been first round picks that it's just such an easy sell to just be like, I mean, come here, man, and you could be next. Like, rather than, which was why it was such a big deal when Manti Te'o was like, I'm going to go there because I'm going to establish this, and he kind of did. And it wasn't like there wasn't great linebackers before him at Notre Dame, but there really wasn't anyone of that level that kind of brought it to that. And he was the guy who really kind of elevated their linebacker recruiting, and it's just part of it, right? Like, so all of that matters, right? When it comes to it, and that's why it's a lot easier to recruit O-line and tight end at Notre Dame. It's like you put so many guys in the league. It's just like I'm not saying you don't have to work, but it does kind of recruit itself. It makes it a lot easier to recruit it.
Right. And everyone knows, like, you're a tight end, you're looking at Notre Dame. You're looking at Iowa, right? Like, you just are. I think for the top 50, it's not that – I think that kind of the misnomer about it is like, academics or whatever. Like, most players, if they want to go to Notre Dame, they get on just fine. And most of them are fine grades-wise. Most of them. Some aren't. But, like, you don't have to be in the top 50 to be – like, the guys in the past we've heard it's like a grades casualty. Like, they weren't top 50 guys. Like, they're just You don't have to be top 50 to struggle in the classroom if you're
Yeah.
doing so, right? Like there's not really a correlation there. I think for a lot of players, top 50, top 100, whoever it might be, you just like the fact that like Ohio State, you were talking about, you want to go to Ohio State, you never have to go into a classroom ever. You can just take online classes. You don't ever have to go. Justin Fields said it. I've never been to a classroom. Granted, it was the COVID era, but still, like, you just don't have to. You can stay at the athletic facility. You can be around the athletic facility, the football offices, and all that stuff. Take online courses, and that's your college experience. Notre Dame is not that. They are not that. And not just that, it's going to be difficult and it's going to be challenging. And not everyone wants that. Fairly, right? Like, fine. Like, that's not for everyone, right? Like, not everyone wants to grind for finals. Not everyone wants to grind on midterms when you've got games coming up, right? Like, not everyone wants that. And so that's the thing. It's not, it's, and Marcus Freeman has talked about this. Like, he's talked about how you got to find the guys that are interested in that grind, but also like, hey, if you just want to be football guys, Notre Dame's an option for you too. And I think that's a big part of the new facility that's coming up that they're building. It's like, no, we are a quote unquote football factory if you want it to be like that. Now, granted, they're never getting rid of the education, nor should they, right? They should not, right? It's part of the university. That sort of thing should never go away, and they need to find a way to win without that, or with that being, part of the deal, right? But for every player, that's not the case. It goes to your point, Jamie. You do need to Jaden Grayhouse, Cam Williams, like get multiple guys who are just studs, like Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas, or Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle and Henry Ruggs and the guy who went to the Broncos. Can't think of his name. Number 4. Why can't I
Jerry
think of his
Jeudy.
name? Jerry Jeudy. Like they were all on campus at the same time. You get all of those guys, like you say, well, I gotta go to Notre Dame. I mean, look at what they just did. Same thing. Ohio State's been living on that for forever, right? And look at Notre Dame at safety now, right? You have Kyle Hamilton, you have Xavier Watts, and now you've got Ivan Taylor, and now you've got Dallas Golden wants to come because of Ben Morrison. Christian Gray wants to come, right? Like, when you start turning out guys at key positions like this, they will come, right?
Yeah.
And to be honest, like, it's kind of amazing what they've done with CJ Carr and Deuce Knight at quarterback without having that big time guy, right? They've been able to land Sam Hartman, who was a big deal. They've been able to land Riley Leonard. They've done a really good job of kind of over recruiting the quarterback position without the prerequisites that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And I do think one of the things with quarterback though is that there's only one Lincoln Riley, like a guy who's really done that well with it. Because even if you look at, say, well, Alabama's had a lot of like first round picks, right? Well,
Yeah.
I mean, that was under a lot of different offensive coordinators. That was just like, they were just great there, great players there who, were surrounded by great talent and whatever. It's like LSU's had a quarterback. They had a quarterback thing for a while, but it's like Joe Burrow and Jaden Daniels weren't guys that, I mean, Daniels was a very highly rated guy, but when he came over from Arizona State, that wasn't seen as like the same as when Caleb Williams came over to USC. Yeah. And yet he was Caleb Williams level good there, or close to it at least, right? So, and obviously Burrow wasn't seen as that either, but it's like one of those things where, yes, that is helping them. Like Underwood, who's obviously the highest rated quarterback in the class, like that's leading to Underwood there, right? And just like Lincoln Riley had it with Murray and Mayfield, right? Where that helped them recruit Rattler and then Caleb Williams, and so on, Juju Lewis now, whatever, and so on and so forth, right? Like that's how they've done it there, because it's like he's had enough success where it leads to that, and that's pretty often how it works, right? For a lot of it, to get that kind of like level of consistency, and then because the other thing, especially with Notre Dame, is like there aren't guys readily available in the Midwest. It's just not the same, right? Like, yeah. So even like the two Chicago really good defensive linemen from Chicago last year, right? The two most highly rated guys, Justin Scott and Marquise Lightfoot, both from Illinois. And, I've seen a lot of like Notre Dame fans complain like, man, how come they couldn't get these guys, like blaming it on Al Washington or whatever. It's like, buddy, I don't care who. I don't care who the heck Notre Dame has their defensive line coach. I don't care if Newt Rockne was the coach at Notre Dame. They were landing those guys. They went to Miami. Like they took the bags of money and ran. Like that's fine. Whatever. That's what they're free to do it. But that's like what it was for them. So it's like, even when you get guys like that, they might not be interested in Notre Dame. So it's hard, right? It's hard to do the thing. And like I would say, even there's a kid right now who's the offensive tackle, Andrew Babalola, who I really, really like. He's like a 5-star offensive tackle, and Notre Dame didn't offer him. And it was like, he was interested in Notre Dame, and he's got good, he's got good grades on it. Like he was visited Stanford and all that.
Yeah.
But I mean, they already had Will Black and Matty Augustine, and they were in very early on. God, what's a Wisconsin kid who I'm just blanking on right now, but the other kid in the class, but who was seen as at
Strabig?
that time, Strabig, yeah, Owen Strabig. So those guys, like when they have those guys in the class, that leads to them maybe not offering him, but like the amount of guys that there are like that, it's like, why did they offer this guy? There's not a lot of those guys out there that it's like, oh, this guy's interested in Stanford. Why didn't they? Why weren't they interested in him? It's like, well, no, like there's just not that many of those guys that are out there that are like that they miss on. And I think too, if you look at with Notre Dame too, when guys are really kind of fit that profile, Notre Dame tends to be on them pretty early. They do a good job of that.
Yeah. We're talking about this. Blayberg's talking about clips from Dallas Golden at an All-Star game or some sort of camp that I haven't seen, and maybe the reason for that is they don't have a good enough media company, and you need to get a good media company to get your stuff out there, Jamie. You got to have good clips. Maybe their clips just aren't good. And their media company, they need to step it up. They need to go with VSR Media, founded by Notre Dame football pregame host and Emmy Award-winning anchor Vahid Sadrazadeh. VSR Media provides professional and cinematic video and photo. Whether you're looking for a collegiate or pro-level highlight reel, have a personal story to tell, or are aiming to diversify and grow your business, VSR Media specializes in short and long-form video storytelling, social media management, and website design. VSR Media also captures professional headshots, senior and sports photos. Contact them at vsrmediacompany.com. Mention Irish Sports Daily to receive 20% off your first project. Visit them online or give them a call at 574-800-9106. Jamie, have you seen these clips of Dallas Golden? Blayberg's incredibly disappointing. It was like Micah Bell redux from the All-American Bowl. I also haven't seen those clips, so I don't know what that means. Getting torched on almost every 1v1. Have you seen these, Jamie? Are you concerned? How do you feel about
it? I mean, I watched the clip. Yeah, I did watch those clips. It's from the Rivals camp.
Okay.
I'm not that concerned because he got beat. Yeah, he definitely got beat a few times, right? But also there's like a bunch of clips on there where it's like, well, he wasn't targeted because he covered the guy.
Right.
And also, if you're watching him, and I think you'll see it too, is like I watch it and I watch the clips of Streebig too, and I'm like, oh my gosh, Streebig, man, this guy's just giving up his arms. I'm like, D lineman, eat you for lunch. He's just sticking out those arms. Like, that's not how you use the length, man. Like, just don't do it. Like, you gotta present your hands a little bit later. But I think you would watch it, Greg, and be like, this guy, because it's a lot of it is a man, and he's on the guy, and then he loses him because he like turns his head early or whatever. There's a lot of that to me, which I would worry a lot more if he was getting cooked, like this guy just ran by you or whatever, right? Or there's something like that. But to me, at least that's what I saw from it. Not enough for me to be like, man, drop this guy way down. Like, but also too, it just shows that I'm like, yeah, he's not like going to be like, he's got a long way to go at corner and it, as like a man guy, like, cause that's just, I mean, that is obviously stuff you learn along the way. But if you're not playing man that often, you're not out there on an island that often, and you're doing it, those are the kind of mistakes you make. Right. So, I don't know. I wouldn't think it's, too much to get worked up over. I don't know. I also think too, like, you never just want to overreact to, like, especially when it's those camps where it's like, oh, the guys they're going against are like better than any of the guys that you would go against normally. So it's like, well, maybe it does mean that he's not shouldn't be rated as high as like I have him. Maybe it does. But I'm like, well, I'm going to let the senior film show out and all these kind of things too, before I get too caught up in it.
Okay. I'll check it out. I don't want to say yay or nay, based on what you're telling me. If he's getting all like, I'm trying to jump things and I'm trying to like make a play, right? Like, and I'm trying to undercut things and I'm getting like in a bad spot or whatever.
Just not staying in phase.
Yeah, like I won't care about that. Like, because here's the thing. He's a guy who plays 75 different positions, right? He's not honing in on the techniques of a corner or a wide receiver. He will look raw at every position that requires technique to be good, because he's not going to hone in on any of that stuff, right? But I'll look at it. I totally don't want to I don't want to totally dismiss it too. I mean, I've heard very many things about Kyle Hamilton and his one-on-one career and how he got cooked by Lawrence Keys in a thing, and then you put him in a football game and he's running stride for stride with like Jalen Guyton up the field and on a corner route, right? Like, so I don't want to overreact. I don't want to underreact. I'll check it out, Blaberg. I tell you what, I'll give it the full send in terms of my own kind of, analysis. And I'll give you an honest assessment of it. Okay. If I don't like it, everyone knows Dallas Golden's my guy. If I don't like it, I'll tell you I don't like it. Come on the next show, which is going to be Tuesday. And while we're mentioning the shows, we're going to have a show next Tuesday as normal. No problem. But that's it, because we got 4th of July on Thursday. And so we're going to only have one show next week. We're just going to do the one show. And so that'll do it for today's show as well. So thank you everyone for tuning in. If you like what you heard, please hit the like, please hit subscribe. Please hit the notification bell so you know whatever it is. We are going live. We'll be back on Tuesday to talk more Notre Dame football. Blaberg, join the show, and I'll give you my my analysis on Dallas Golden and one-on-ones. All right. Have a good weekend, everyone. We'll talk to you soon. Keep hitting and